From the Predator flaming Johnny Bones for taking too long to return, to Dana White shooting down the idea once again. This is what happened between Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones' face-off at the PFL event. Francis had no chill when he met the UFC GOAT and told him that he had been waiting for him to return for more than 3 years. This was after the two men met cage-side at the PFL 5 event and even got a chance to get their hands on each other. Jon felt Ngannou's arms, while the Predator touched his opponent's tummy to see how much weight his would-be rival had gained. The two of them shared a laugh and told each other that they had nothing but respect for the other guy. Francis suggested that they need to make this fight happen, even though Jones is with the UFC and the Predator's fighting under the PFL banner. Jon tried playing it down by saying that Ngannou doesn't really want this, but if he did, then he would have stuck around with the UFC. Francis clarified that he gave Johnny Boy enough time, but he took too long to return. Jones made a point that he had to get to the proper weight and size for Ngannou, and he also added that for the Predator to take him out, he'd have to get better at wrestling too. The Cameroonian responded by saying that he had been waiting for Jon for a very long time, and that he has been working on his ground game a lot. The face-off became one of the biggest talking points of the PFL event and brought in a large number of eyes due to the presence of two of the top heavyweights in the world. Once the showdown was over, Ngannou made sure to let the people know that there was no bad blood between them and that this was all just business. The two men have been on the receiving end of Dana White's bad books at some point in their careers. In the past, it was Jon who was running from fighting tough guys according to the UFC boss. But now it's Francis who's doing that. The issue of fighter pay is also something that they both have been vocal about, so they understand what the other one is going through. That doesn't mean that they don't want to fight each other, because Ngannou wants to show the world that he's the baddest dude on the planet. While talking to TMZ about the face-off, Francis admitted that he prefers fighting a heavyweight Jon, because he doesn't look like the striking genius that he once was, and that obviously has a lot to do with the weight that he had to put on. Ngannou also said that even at light heavyweight, Jon was cutting a lot to make it to the scales, but he was still really good in the octagon. Now that Jones is heavier, he doesn't look as sharp. Something Francis highlighted was visible during his fight against Cyril Gane, because he may have been able to take down and submit the Frenchman. Jon didn't look too great on his feet. The face-off was pretty hype for the fight world, cause come on, who wouldn't want to see the two behemoths clash? Michael Bisping and Anthony Smith are all up for it, but they understand that it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. The Count pointed out that UFC won't ever go for a cross-promotion thing, cause it just doesn't make sense for them, and they'll only be putting up their rivals on an equal footing as themselves. Dana doesn't work that way, and he certainly won't be getting too much out of it. Bisping was sold on the idea of Francis taking on Jones, and he even wanted them to fight right there and then by the cage. The former UFC middleweight champ was pleasantly surprised at how well Ngannou handled the whole thing, telling off Jon for sitting on the sidelines for that long. As excited as they were about the face-off, Mike and Smith think that Francis has an amazing deal with the PFL right now, and that he's gonna see out the duration of his 3-fight contract and retire with a ton of money. Then there's the boxing thing that Ngannou wants to pursue as well, so the chances of him fighting Jones are very slim right now. Even Daniel Cormier thinks that it was nothing but a tease, and so the whole thing just sucks. DC shared the sentiments as Bisping, because the UFC won't ever allow this fight to happen. The two men can face off all they like, but they're not sharing the octagon ever. Cormier knows Jon better than anyone, because of the rivalry they shared for years. And he says that Jones didn't look the least bit intimidated by the Predator during their exchange. The look that Bones had on his face wasn't missed by Chael Sonnen either. But unlike DC, the bad guy thinks that was because Jon knew they were never gonna fight. He added that the two of them have avoided each other for years. And now that they know nothing's gonna happen, they walk into the same building at the same time and face off each other. Chael was right about it though, because Jon went MIA in 2020 and only returned after 3 years when Ngannou parted ways with the UFC. Francis, on the other hand, hasn't fought since the beginning of 2022 either, and he won't be stepping into the octagon before 2024. So the whole thing is nothing more than a facade according to the American gangster. That's something that Ngannou himself has more or less confirmed. During a recent interview, the Predator admitted that there's a greater chance of him fighting Deontay Wilder than throwing it down against Jones. He also revealed that he had an offer from Anthony Joshua for December 2023 as well, and they were discussing the possibility of doing a boxing match and following things up in an MMA octagon. One of those would be in Africa as well. According to Ngannou, all of the parties involved were willing to make it happen, and they even agreed on most of the contract details. Francis isn't giving up on the Jon Jones fight, but the boxing match is something that he sees happening before anything else right now. And it makes sense too, because this was one of the major reasons that forced the Predator out of the UFC. Ngannou has been linked with some of the top heavyweights in the world, and the list includes Tyson Fury in addition to Wilder and Joshua. Nothing has been finalized as yet, and I doubt it would happen either, because a Francis Ngannou with a UFC strap and Dana on his shoulder is much more lucrative for any boxer than a guy who just signed with the PFL. Anyway, a boxing match isn't something that the fans want to see either. They want to watch Jon dismantle Ngannou in the octagon. Even before they came face to face, Francis and Jon were eyeing each other from across the room. Jones was in the octagon, cornering for his teammate, and he kept staring at the Predator. Jon even mimicked choking out Ngannou, and he went down striking his signature pose. Francis could be heard telling Bones to ask his daddy to release him, so he can come fight him in the octagon for real. The fans were largely siding with Jon as they pointed out that he's far too technical for Ngannou, and it won't even be a fair fight. A guy even said that Jones was living rent-free in the Predator's head, but overall the fans were pretty hyped for this one because this was the biggest UFC fight that never happened. Someone clapped back at Ngannou's comment, mocking Jon for having Dana as his daddy when new PFL fighter is owned by the likes of Jake Paul. All of this wasn't missed by the UFC boss, and he just nipped it in the bud, again. While on the Pat McAfee show, Dana was asked about the face-off between Francis and Jon and how the PFL actually boosted their tweet to gain the UFC's attention. It's clear that the PFL wants to make this happen, but Dana isn't interested in it at all. He said that Ngannou was with the UFC, and Jones wanted that fight the entire time. They even tried to make it happen, but it just didn't work out. White didn't say anything else on the matter, but in the past, he has accused the Predator of running away from this fight because he doesn't want to take risks anymore. Ngannou responded to the clip and clarified that he waited for 3 years for this fight, but Jon was away on vacation. Dana clearly doesn't like Ngannou because of the falling out that they had due to the demands of the former champ. But that obviously doesn't mean that Francis was running away from anybody. While it was just a face-off, it kept fans interested in the dream fight that never happened. So, from Dana White shooting down the idea once again, to the Predator flaming Johnny Bones for taking too long to return. This was what happened between Francis Ngannou and Jon Jones' face-off at the PFL event.